toward the end of the opinion, the role of the state of Texas specifically does end up coming up, and not so ironically, the reason I'm reading this case is because it was referenced in a case that was recently decided on in the state of Texas. And since the time that this opinion has been written, a lot has happened, and it is specifically a lot has happened in regards to the implications around air travel and the retirement system, including the state retirement system, and other things that are allowed to be considered acceptable in terms of whatever might have been involved with associating the airline sector with the retirement system. And he discusses specifically, it says, in concluding that the National Association of Attorneys General's fair advertising guidelines are preempted. We do not, as Texas contends, set out on a road that leads to preemption of state laws against gambling and prostitution as applied to airlines. Now, the thing is that in reading the whole opinion and seeing the careful discernment that was engaged in the construction of the opinion and the way that it was worded and the manners in which it took on certain very specific issues about representation and association, especially right after discussing very pointedly all the considerations that go into an understanding of what you're advertising when you're discussing advertising a passenger flight. This is the crucial matter that still has not been addressed appropriately. This is absolutely the matter at hand, and this consideration of speculation on something like air travel and how advertising and representations involved in advertising are allowed to impact the other concerns. Now, he says at the end of this particular opinion that an injunctive and declaratory relief in respect to the specific provisions that are addressed regarding the disclosure around fares and the advertising. But he also says that relief directed at other matters is reversed and the injunction vacated. So this brings up a very significant consideration of subsequent attempts to use this case in the specific contextualization that was described in the case. I.e., if it says directed at other matters is reversed and the injunction vacated. So the concept of being able to put an injunction upon a state challenge to what they understand to be a refusal to adhere to terms regarding disclosure or explication and or consideration of compliance with state laws around representation or advertising or other things that might be considered deceptive practices. Any sort of injunction against having to respond to that state challenge has been vacated and reversed, meaning what? Well, this is different than what I believe is currently at work, right? And the manners in which the attempts to allow for a illicit or unacceptable kind of commingling when it comes to both explicit but also the derivative expressions of what a particular service means versus another service. This is very concerning. Especially because of the way he's constructed it. And I'm just going to say, not from an aesthetic sense, but from a sense of understanding something as having a kind of validity and foundation for taking on something this massive. This is something that is, I think, very supporting in terms of its construction about the very matters that are at the essence of what has been going on in the state of Texas for the last 3 years that I've been attempting to report on. That explicit adherence to the standards that are required for somebody to be determined to be eligible for the job they are representing they're performing. We're not, so even if we're talking about advertising or in terms of a representation of what you can expect to receive from a department or what you can expect to receive from a system, that the demonstration of competence which comes with being able to perform the job role and then being able to follow up on and demonstrate an accurate performance of the job role, then ends up reflecting on the integrity of the department at hand. So, for instance, and I think it's appropriate to take it there now that there's this kind of a foundation. This is an appropriate foundation for discussing other matters. If my concern is that there is an attempt to try to compel people that are seeking basic resources to engage in some form of behavior akin to gambling in order to get their basic needs met. And part of that gambling is also about getting away with things that are not explicitly legal or that they know are against the rules and procedures associated with the agency from which they're trying to acquire it. And then part of the gambling is allowing that particular level to be included in consideration of other levels that are dealing with things like addressing the terms related to a proposed financing package for municipal bonds that will then be used in connection with benefits that will be drawn on by the people involved in this gambling syndicate, for instance. Then we have a very important matter because compliance with certain standards is going to determine what somebody understands the financial performance capability of that political subdivision and or of the agencies and departments that are a part of it, that will be evaluated in determining the credibility or the creditability of the entity when it goes into putting forth that financing proposal. And so people that would be buying the bonds and or people that would be engaging in the processes around those bonds, including people that might be doing public works within the city or even private development with an understanding that there are various kinds of basis that they can, create investment portfolios for long-term investment in that development are factoring into, are going to be, impacted by the representation of the success or corruption, contrarily, the corruption, the capability of the departments of that city to meet the requirements of their jobs. And so, for instance, if you have the police department that is required to do certain things in order to uphold the explicit laws of the various jurisdictions they serve, the laws of the state, the federal laws, including specific terms or ordinances of the city, and then they need to, do what they need to do to perform their jobs, and they are not performing their jobs in an explicit, verifiable manner. And not only that, because, you have to understand there are going to be situations where people are going to need to address a failure in being provided with a service, or something has been represented as being provided to them, and then it hasn't been provided to them, so then they need to appeal that, or they need to challenge the lack of getting what it was that they needed at the time. How does the department handle that? And so then you get into things like the offices of professional standards, or you get into the internal affairs division. And if what happens is every time you try to engage a city or a municipality, they do something where they divert you to something that is about making a hedge on a particular systematology related to the retirement system, then you're getting into another area where the concern becomes, well, you're the one that's supposed to provide this job. You're getting paid to provide this job. Somebody paying you to do this job is included in financing and financial portfolios associated with credit ratings that are developed in accordance with people understanding they have an expectation to be able to receive certain services.
It is fair to say at this point that you've been getting paid and offering to pay other people with work that you not only did not do, but it seems that even if the means are at hand, you refuse to do. You are not going to be asked to stand down. Again, every day you put your face in front of other people as if it is an authority is going to be credited against you. You understand? All of you. Every single one of you. How dare you interfere with a formal diplomatic communication with an official representative of another country? How dare you think you have a right to take that and use it to cover your defaults? You will not get any warnings. I told you, when you try to keep me out of the public and you put yourself there instead, you better hope you don't succeed.